to answer questions today. I'm just asking them. All right, moving on. So then we did another company together. We were there for 3 or 4 years doing. I was there. You were there for 2.5 years. I was there for 4 years. That was another machine learning focused company locally. We did that. Then you started another company, which was about helping people using automation to automate the process of creating other startups. So very meta and potentially applicable to this conversation. I don't want to dwell on that, but I think it's useful context for folks. And then we come to the world of Bionic, longevity, and you've been really gracious to go this long without making the Bionic pitch, by the way, and I want you to be able to make that pitch to explain what you're doing now. But you talk about sleeping in the office at Cisco. I know you're working really hard during the days of Automated Insights and Infinia. Did entrepreneurial burnout, even in a physical sense, contribute to your desire to start a health company?
It wasn't the reason why I started the health company, but it's the reason that I started my health journey. Again, using that word. So, this was probably 2014 or so. I'd gotten pretty overweight. I was very, I played in 5 sports in high school. I was doing a lot of athletic stuff. I played baseball initially in college before I just focused on computer science. But by the time I was knee deep in Automated Insights, my first startup, I hadn't worked out in years. I was pretty unhealthy. I was sleeping. I was one of those people that said, I only need 5 hours of sleep a night. I don't need more than that. And I could go, pull some all-nighters every once in a while. I'm fine. I don't need that kind of sleep. That's for other people. And then one day when I went in to see my primary care doctor in the annual physical, some of my metrics came back, specifically testosterone was like super low, and I was 32 or 33, something like that. And just really low for a 33-year-old. It was like, well, why did that happen? So I started getting on some medication for that. It got fixed. The next year I went in to see the doctor, and I get my blood work done the week before, so he'd have all the data when I do my physical. And I said, so how did my testosterone look? And he said, what do you mean? I'm like, well, it's been low the last couple of years, and I just wanted to make sure it's still good. He said, oh no, we fixed that last year, remember? I was like, well, but it just kind of popped up out of nowhere. We didn't know why it happened. You still can't even tell me why that happened or why it even went away. And he's like, yeah, but I think you're fine. And this just started a trend of like year after year, I would have this argument almost with my doctor over like, I want the testosterone checked. It's like, I don't know why this is like a $5 test. Like, just make sure it's in there. And it was just this battle. And I was like, something's messed up here. This is a little ridiculous. And then I started, I was wearing wearables, so I had a Fitbit, because that was one of the things at Automated Insights we were thinking, well, maybe we can make wearable data interesting to people by summarizing it in a narrative form. And but it was still too young of a market to really make any sense for us to pursue. But I had wearable data for like 12 years, and I went into my doctor, hey, can I give you access to my data so you can see it? And he's like, no, I'm good, I don't need that. I'm like, okay. I didn't know if there's anything useful for him either, but it felt like it wasn't an environment in which they were wanting to rely on data to help make decisions. And so, then I started to read more about, health and longevity, and, it started to become more popular. Lots of books about the evils of sugar and, how sleep actually is super important, and all these things. I started reading about people like Peter Attia, Andrew Huberman, if you've heard of them. And so as I started to get more into this, I started to, I was in CrossFit for a while. I started working out more, and I got healthier. And so when I was looking to start my next company, I decided I wanted to do it at the intersection of healthcare and machine learning. Because of what's going on with machine learning and AI, we're now at a point where it's feasible that we can start automating what doctors do. And so that's what they call the clinical decision support. That is the decisions doctors make. We can now start to automate that in ways that have not been possible in the past. And fundamentally, and this is something that, it's been fascinating to see. Dating back to 2010, when we would get like all sorts of articles written about us because like journalists were scared we were automating them out of a job. It was never the case. Like, I'm not aware of a single job that we automated somebody out of. And in fact, this is often comes up in press, like what's the future of jobs, right? what's the workforce going to do? And what I can say, at least that's been the case up to now, is that it's not like people like me are out there and say, you know what, let's go find the highest paying jobs that people love and let's go automate those. That's almost never, like, that's competition, right? Like, I'm gonna have a solution, maybe it's less expensive, but there's competition with people that love those jobs. Typically, what entrepreneurs like myself do is say, well, what are the jobs out there that aren't being done, that we have a supply-demand problem? Let's go solve that with automation. And guess what? That's exactly what we have in healthcare. At least in Raleigh, if you want to schedule a new primary care doctor appointment, you're looking at, I'd say at a minimum 6 months. That's if you find like a fresh doctor out of school, and more like 9 months if you're getting somebody that has any experience at all. And so what other area of capitalism do you have 9-month waits to deliver a service? Like, it's unheard of. Like, it's ridiculous, and it's only getting worse. Doctor job satisfaction is an all-time low. Doctors and nurses are leaving the system in droves. So to me, I think it's imperative that we start automating doctors, because you don't want to see in another 10 years, if we don't, what the system looks like. It's only going to get worse. It's not getting better for doctors. They do not like their job, for the most part. Some do, of course, but it's just not a great job in many ways because of the health system that we've kind of built. And so for me, it was like, all right, there's an opportunity there. And, with me and my co-founder, he's a doctor, so I just play one on TV. And at Halloween, he loves that when I come in with my lab coat. But he's an ER doctor by training, but he also had gone through a similar health journey where he went deep into longevity medicine and preventative care. And so when we got together, we're like, all right, what can we do? Why don't we automate, a lot of what makes creating doctor-oriented businesses very expensive? We can automate that piece of it. That is the doctor part, because doctors are expensive. And so if we can do that, then maybe we can create a new type of healthcare that can be more affordable than what previously was available. Because now, the challenges is, the other issue with preventative care is insurance doesn't cover it, right? And I think if you maybe peel back, and if I had that conversation with my primary care doctor, why not just give me the testosterone test, and why not give me this other test? I think it's just they're scared that they're going to add it into the thing, and then insurance isn't going to cover it, and then I'm going to get a bill, and then I'm going to be mad that, hey, why did I get this $10 bill? And so at the root of all this is just how crappy the insurance system is with healthcare, right? And so what we decided is, we're not even going to take insurance. We're going to be out of that, because most of what we're going to recommend insurance wouldn't cover. Because the health system today is all about sick care. If you have symptoms or if you're sick, the health system's pretty good for that. We believe that ultimately we want to prevent people from getting sick, right? 40% of Americans die from chronic diseases that could be prevented. And so for us, and the analogy my co-founder loves to give is, so he's an ER doctor, worked in the ER for many years, and he said it was kind of like being at the bottom of a cliff. And you're looking up, and people are just running off the cliff. When, for him, he's like, well, just put a fence up there. Just put a fence to stop people running off the cliff. But we don't do that. We just let people continue to do, and experience and go through unhealthy habits and ways of living, and not treating, things that, start small and then grow to be big things. We don't stop those things, right? We wait till you're sick. And in a lot of cases, it's too late. Or at least your quality of life is going to be diminished significantly. So anyway, when we started, and I went to my wife, I was like, all right, I'm going to go start another company. She's like, why are you going to do this? Come on, like, just, go invest in startups or whatever the other thing you do.
Yeah, because at that point you're already, and I would say very successfully, the Tweener Fund has been very successful in putting investment into many, is it just the RTP region or the whole state?
Triangle.
The Triangle region.
Which includes Pittsburgh for us. That we include Pittsburgh.
So you already had that going on.
Yeah, I already had that. But again, I'm my mid to late 40s at that point. I was like, I'm not the retirement kind, and so I figured I had one more startup in me. And this time around, what I told my wife is like, the thing that felt a little bit hollow with my previous companies is those were technology companies kind of for technology's sake, right? They weren't necessarily putting a dent in the universe or making people's lives better. I mean, you know, maybe some of the content we created was humorous or entertainment or, you know, informative.
We
But
put smiles on the faces of America.
yes, we did that. But I thought now I had an opportunity to actually maybe help people get healthier. And so what I told my wife is like, you know, I don't know, in 5 years, you know, Bionic may blow up spectacularly, but at least we'll have made a lot of people healthier. And that feels good. And so we're a year into it now. So we started Bionic Health. It's a preventative care program. And if you're familiar with kind of the space, there's a book called Outlive that I recommend for people that are kind of generally interested. You know, I kind of begrudgingly recommend it because it's this thick. You know, it's a big book, but it's pretty readable. But the problem is you get to the end of it, it's like all this great science and stuff you can do to understand your health, all this data you can collect around your health, continuous glucose monitors, you can get DEXA scans to do, you know, kind of understand your fat and lean mass composition throughout your body. There's much more, you know, detailed labs that you can get, blood work that you can get that really kind of help you understand your heart health. You know, even things like whole genome sequencing now is just a few $100s. A few years ago, it was a few $1,000 and $10,000. You know, within a couple, 3 years, I would say you get your whole genome sequence for $100. Every baby that pops out will get their whole genome sequence. You only need to do it once. It doesn't change. But then
We hope.
What's that?
We hope.
Yeah, that's true. Well, maybe it will.
Maybe that's your next company.
No, this is it. Last one. And so anyway, we focused on creating what we call the Bionic journey. Again, that's the word of the day. And we've had we have about 155 members that have, you know, gone through it over the last year, and the results have been great. I mean, that's what we had hoped. It was our hypothesis that you come in and do the testing that we want to do, and we're going to find stuff that you didn't know about. I mean, it even happened with me. I mean, I was fairly well tested until we did all the tests on me, and we found stuff that I didn't know about. And it, you know, just to give you an example, I mean, and again, this is something that's illustrative of kind of our broader population of members. So 80% of our members, we find health concerns that they didn't know they had. And in 25% of our members, they're life-shortening, potentially life-shortening health concerns that they didn't know they had. So what was mine? So we do my test and my ferritin levels come back super high. So what's ferritin? So my number was like 900. You want it under 100. So ferritin is related to iron absorption. So iron's a key aspect of blood, and you know, you need it in your blood. And ferritin is you know, a marker that identifies how much iron you retain in your blood. You want to retain some, but you also want to get rid of it, because if you continue to accumulate iron, guess what? It goes to your organs, and eventually your organs retain all this iron and they start shutting down. And so there's no long-lived people in the world, there's been studies that have high ferritin levels, because what happens over time, you just collect all this iron and it affects your organs. Well, I do my test, and this was just a year and a half ago, and ferritin levels off the charts. And the way it works is it only gets that way because over time there's been a prolonged absorption of iron. And so I probably always had this condition, I just never knew about it. Again, it's a $10 test that my doctor could have done, never did. And it's the kind of thing you probably never would have done. You know, again, iron-related labs are not terribly common amongst primary care annual physicals. They are pretty common around, you know, for kind of extensive blood panels like we do. And so in the longevity space, it's pretty well known. You got to check your iron just to make sure you're not like in my situation. Well, now what does that mean? Well, I got to get my ferritin levels down. Really, the only way to do that is to donate blood. You know, so now I have to donate blood every 8 weeks for ever, maybe, to get those levels down, just so I don't have that. Now, again, I could have gone and I probably wouldn't have symptoms for another 20 years, maybe. And there's a couple of symptoms you might start to see after, you know, extremely long times of this happening. But again, I'm going to wake up at 65 and like, oh no, I've got, you know, way too much iron in my liver, and now there's all sorts of nasty things I got to do to fix it. When if I just had checked in my 40s, I could have, you know, started to correct it. This is just one example. I have lots of these kinds of examples. And that's kind of the point, is that trying to at least start to examine and look for these kind of things earlier, than waiting until you actually start to show symptoms of something. And so with Bionic, we like to say we put the easy button on this stuff, right? Because even if you read that Outlive book that I mentioned, you get to the end of it, you're like, okay, how do I get started with all that? There's a lot in there. And plus, I'd like a doctor to kind of help me through this. What we offer is the easy button for that, and with doctor guidance. So how we're different than a lot of other online services is we have doctors in the loop. So you go through our program. At the first step, you meet with the physician for 45 minutes, and they review all of these biomarkers that we tested for, right? So it's not a 10-minute meeting like you might get with your primary care. It's a 45 very in-depth meeting. That's kind of the beginning of the process for us. Then from there, we come up with a treatment plan and other things we want to test for. Again, maybe it's wearing a glucose monitor to see how you react to certain types of foods. Maybe it's a body composition test. There's many of these that we're offering. We're about to launch a brain health module as well to start seeing, there's some blood tests you can do now to see if there's early signs of maybe plaques, the types of plaques that build up on your brain. There's a blood test now that will check for that. So anyway.
Yeah. And I'm a Bionic member too, and I've gone through some of this journey, and it's been fascinating. And the ability to get onto your app and just chat and just ask any question and have either a doctor or a nutritionist or a sports physiologist, exercise person get back to me, that is one of the killer apps of the thing too. All right, I got reams of questions that I will ask if no one in the audience has any questions, but we want to